Hey guys, in this video I will analyze the poem Biltong composed by James Twala. James Twala is a South African poet born in 1941. He was born in KwaZulu-Natal and educated at Nuclear Community School where he developed an interest in poetry. He eventually settled in Soweto. Biltong by James Twala. The lean strips hang like dead faceless serpents on the slack washing line. The sun parches the biltong with the patience of a housewife. The wings of large flies sing continuously around the dangling strips that are streaked with dark fat. At dusk, a large-mouthed woman emerges from the house and stomps to the washing line, snaps and jerks at the biltong as if it were bait, then plucks the biltong like dry washing from the line. Inside the house, 4 mounds of steaming porridge are ready and 4 lean-bodied children are squatting like sleepy frogs with their eyes fixed on the biltong. They gnaw on the biltong with twisted faces, grip and tear the biltong with their half-rotten teeth. What is not ground well will be brought up deep in the night to be chewed a second time like cows in the kraal. In this poem, 4 starving children wait for their mother to bring them a piece of biltong to eat with their porridge. The way the poet describes the scene and the biltong depicts the desperation in the situation. The biltong is not described as appetizing, and the children are described as if they are animals, and later cows. The whole picture created is dismal. Twala uses a third person to describe the family and their meal of porridge and biltong. The narrator feels sorry for this family living in great poverty and how they must eat unhealthy dried meat as their only source of protein. The narrator addresses society at large as he exposes the terrible circumstances of a poverty-stricken family. Type of poem. This poem is a narrative. It is also a free verse. Theme. The poem describes the abject poverty and hunger of a family who have very little to eat and are desperate for food to fill their empty stomachs. The poem delivers a powerful message about poverty and its effect on children. The poet comments on a society and a country that tolerate such suffering. Abject refers to a hopeless or miserable situation, indicating intense suffering. Mood. The mood created by the poet is one of desperation. The title of the poem. The title creates the image of biltong as a tasty and expensive snack which is mostly enjoyed by those who can afford it. It seems to be a symbol of wealth. In the poem, however, the poet describes the strips of biltong as unappetizing and unhygienic. This biltong is eaten to prevent starvation. Instead of it being an enjoyable snack, it becomes a symbol of poverty. This poem consists of 4 stanzas. Stanza 1 and 2 are 7 lines each. They each describe the situation before the porridge and biltong are served to the children. The description is detailed and drawn out. This emphasizes the waiting that the hungry children must suffer. In stanza 1, the biltong is described as the opposite of how we usually see biltong. It is unhygienic and unappetizing, made of a very poor quality meat. In stanza 2, the woman who takes the biltong off the line feels trapped by her poverty and the fact that her children have to suffer because of it. Stanza 3 has only 5 lines. The children are balanced like frogs, ready to leap on their food. They greedily watch as the biltong is measured out. We have almost reached the point when the waiting is over and the children will soon receive their supper. Everyone is very still, waiting for the moment when they can eat. Stanza 4 has 9 very short lines. The children eat the food as fast as they can. The meal is over quickly. As we watch them eat, we know that they will get little goodness from the food. Later that night, they will be hungry once again. They will have nothing else to eat except the undigested food that rises to their throats. Note once again that by dehumanizing the children, the poet comments on the value of a society and a country which allows children to suffer in such poverty. Let's have a closer look at each stanza. The poem is set in a poor township or a rural village in South Africa. In stanza 1, the biltong is referred to as lean strips hanging on a washing line and compared to dead faceless serpents. The sun dries the biltong, parches it over time, while flies buzz around the meat and its dark fat. The comparison does not make the biltong something one would look forward to eating, and yet the children are, which reveals how truly hungry they are. The comparison of the sun with a patient housewife is linked to the woman who has hung the biltong out to dry. Singing is normally something positive, but here it describes the noise made by fly wings, which makes the biltong even less appetizing. In line 1, the biltong is described as lean, which indicates to us that it has very little nutrition. The thin strips of biltong are compared to faceless serpents hanging on the line. A serpent is a snake. The biltong looks like snakes because both are long and very thin and without any nourishment and considered disgusting. Literally, the strips are long and thin, like the bodies of snakes, with not much meat available to feed at least 4 children. Figuratively, according to the Bible, the serpent is man's enemy. The poet implies that poverty is evil and these people's worst enemy. In line 3, the poet says, "The sun parches the biltong," indicating that the biltong is extremely dried out and not tasty at all. Also in line 3 and 4, we see that the sun has the patience of a housewife. This is an example of personification. The sun is described as an enemy, depriving the children of any nourishment. In line 5, the poet describes the large flies around the meat. This emphasizes that the meat is unappetizing and will probably make the children sick. The fact that they still eat it underlines how hungry they are. The word sing in line 6 refers to the buzzing of the flies around the meat. This is an example of onomatopoeia. The word sing also creates an antithesis, but I will explain this in the next slide. The flies reflect unhygienic circumstances and could cause diseases. The S alliteration in lines 5 and 6 sounds like the buzzing sound made by these house flies sitting on the meat. The fat on the biltong is not yellow, but dark. The dark fat on the biltong indicates the poor quality of the meat, once again emphasizing that this is not an appetizing meal. As already said, the word sing in line 6 creates an antithesis. Antithesis refers to a person or thing that is the direct opposite of someone or something else. Singing is usually associated with joy, pleasure, satisfaction, and thankfulness. But here in this poem, the singing reflects to the sound made by the wings of the flies sitting on the meat. This image reflects disgust and revolt. It becomes obvious that this biltong is only eaten out of necessity. It is not a tasty snack. Stanza 2. In the evening, a woman described as large-mouthed, which makes us wonder, is she also hungry or does she complain a lot? The woman stomps or walks with a heavy tread as if angry and snaps and jerks at the biltong as she takes it down to take it inside. Bait is put out to trap something, such as a fish. In this poem, the biltong is compared to bait, and the woman then to some prey, snapping at it hungrily. Her actions are also compared to those of taking dry washing down from the line. Line 8. At dusk. At dusk means at sunset or early evening. In line 9, the woman is described as large-mouthed. This description is possibly used to show that she complains and or she is hungry. In line 10, the woman stomps to the washing line. Stomps indicates to us that she walks with a heavy tread as if angry. She is upset because she is poor and cannot feed her children a nutritious meal. Note the verbs snaps, jerks, plucks. These are strong verbs to reflect her frustration at her hopelessly miserable circumstances. In line 11 to 12, the biltong is compared to bait. This is a simile. The biltong is compared to bait and the woman is compared to prey. Bait is put out to trap something, such as fish. The biltong is compared to bait and the woman to some prey snapping at it hungrily. A fish thinks it is swallowing food, but it is about to die. The mother and her family are starving and prepared to take the risk of eating the biltong, even if it's not healthy. The woman feels trapped by her hopeless circumstances and the fact that her children have to suffer because of it. In lines 13 to 14, we find another simile. Plucks the biltong like dry washing from the line. The biltong is compared to dry washing in the sense that she grabs the biltong off the line in the same way she would pull the clean washing off once it is dry. The movements are quick and rough. The mother is clearly frustrated and impatient. Once again, the biltong is described as something unappetizing, not fit for eating. Taking washing from the line is something a housewife does almost every day. It is routine, just like her life, in stanza 3. This stanza describes the 4 children inside the house staring hungrily at the biltong, their porridge ready and waiting. Inside the house, contrast with emerges from the house in line 9. Notice the simile. A simile is one thing described in terms of another. The simile, squatting like sleepy frogs. Also, the mother has not served porridge for herself. 4 mounds, 4 children. Perhaps there isn't enough. Squatting suggests that the 4 are sitting on the floor ready to devour the biltong as they stare fixedly at it. This is a picture of extreme hunger. In line 16, as already said, we note that the mother has not served porridge for herself because there probably just wasn't enough food. In line 17, we note that there are 4 children and that the children are described as lean-bodied. The porridge is not nutritious. This image reflects that the children often go hungry. They are thin and malnourished. Porridge is watery. Perhaps the mother mixed the maize with more water than she should have to increase the amount of the porridge. In line 18, the children are squatting. They sit on the ground. It is a traditional way to sit when they eat. However, this also shows that they are too poor for any furniture. The children are also compared to sleepy frogs, another simile. The children are not lively and full of energy like other children. This could be due to the lack of nutrition. Their eyes are big and round like those of a frog. This is a typical sign of malnutrition in children. They squat, which makes them seem as if they were ready to pounce on the meat. The description of these children creates a feeling of pathos. The reader feels deeply saddened by the plight or the troubles of these children who cannot fend for themselves. The reader is haunted by the image of these starving children, maybe even compelled to become involved in improving their circumstances. In stanza 4, this stanza describes the children eating the biltong and the way they do so, their faces twisted, the way they attack the biltong, they grip and tear, and their rotten teeth, uncared for and decaying from their bad diet. The last 5 lines likens them to cows chewing the cud. The picture of hunger is continued. Notice the verbs gnaw, grip and tear, likening the way they eat to that of animals. The last 5 lines imply that they cannot afford to waste any of the meat and that they will chew it a second time in the night like a cow. Their hunger makes them less than human. This is a comment on a society and country that tolerates such poverty. In lines 20 to 22, the poet uses a metaphor as he describes the children as if they were less than human and more like animals. They gnaw on the biltong and their faces become twisted as they grip and tear at it. They find it difficult to bite off and chew the biltong because it is tough and hard and their teeth are half rotten. This image once again emphasizes their poverty and helplessness. In lines 24 to 28, the biltong makes them sick because their teeth are too rotten to chew the meat well. When they bring up the meat, they cannot afford to waste any of it. Therefore, they chew it again. In line 28, they regurgitate and chew their food again like cows. This is a simile. The poet dehumanizes the children to comment on the values of a society and country which allows children to suffer in such poverty. The poem makes us think about the terrible effects of poverty on a family that is unable to feed itself. Constant hunger and poor nutrition lead to disease and eventual death. Traditionally, mothers are seen as the providers of food and nourishment of their children. Poor mothers struggle daily to provide any food for their families. We feel the hopelessness of the mother of a poor family with 4 children. She is desperate to feed her children, but has very little to offer them. This has made her frustrated and impatient. It seems as if she gives what little food there is to her children and has nothing left for herself. Despite her efforts, her children are unhealthy, with half-rotten teeth, malnourished with lean bodies, and constantly hungry. Through this poem, the poet tries to create awareness of abject poverty and the suffering of children, challenging us as readers to do something about it.